where when I was young, I was able to get an internship in the NFL. You know, I was 18 years old, and I worked for the Oakland Raiders, and you know, it was an amazing achievement. I wrote the team a letter, and that's how I got in, right? I guess we could talk about that. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So, you know, all our lives, I don't know if your parents were like that, but my parents were like, go to school, get a job, you know, and I don't know if you were pigeonholed into like nurse or post office, right? You know,
nurse, medical field.
Yeah, for me it was just get a degree and go work in tech somewhere, you know, because both my parents worked in the Silicon Valley, and you know they did well. I mean, for them, for the baby boomers, it worked, right? But for my generation and maybe yours, I don't think it works, right?
No.
But you know, my dad was passionate about music, and he gave up music very young, and you know, he never pursued his bliss. And to this day, he picks up a guitar and he lights up, right? And I'm not faulting him for that. He did what he felt was best, and he was a great father, and he raised a great family. But we're always taught, like, you know, you have to do this, you have to do this, right? But nobody ever asks us, like, what do we really want to do, right? So somewhere along the lines, I was like 18 years old. I always loved sports, right? Growing up, all my friends were good athletes. I wasn't, but I like sports, right? So I grew up in the baseball generation. I grew up in the 90s. It was all about baseball, you know, and then 95 strike came and baseball kind of stopped, and then the Oakland Raiders had moved up to Oakland, back from LA to Oakland, and I went to my first NFL game ever, right? And it was an electric experience. Like the Coliseum was sold out. Like Napoleon Kaufman ran the kickoff back. The first kickoff, ran it back for 95 yards, touchdown. The crowd was electric. Like we couldn't even hear each other. Like this is how close we'd be. I'd be screaming, you couldn't even hear me. That's how loud it was, right? And the energy, and it lit something up in me, and I was like, oh my God, like I don't know, like. I don't know what, but this is what I want to do with my life. Like something, like it was like I found my passion. Like it was the NFL, like football, right? So I tried to play, but I hurt my back in a car accident, and I was no good. I kind of sucked. So my Rudy attempt ended before it even started. I don't know if you saw the movie Rudy, but it's like a guy that tries to play. Anyways, the listeners out there will understand that one. But so my Rudy attempt ended before it even started. So I figured, what's the next best thing but to work in sports, right? But I had no idea how I was gonna do it, right? But I just remember we got AOL, right? So I don't know if you remember.
I've used AOL,
so,
AIM.
Yeah, AIM. So back AOL dominated everything. So I would be on chat rooms, and I'd be on ESPN.com, and you know what? The Raiders just had like a horrible season. It was 2 years later. It was 1997. They went 4-12, and I was like, you know what? I just want to be heard. I'm gonna write them a letter. So like I wrote a 3-page letter, and I sent it to Al Davis, to Bruce Allen, to John Gruden, because he was the coach at the time, and he's the coach again now. And I said, I just want to be heard. And I was like ripping the team, and I was like, we need this and we need that, and there's no leadership. And I was like, I don't care. I expected like a sticker from the secretary, like, thank you for being a fan, right? Well, I get an email from the general manager, like Bruce Allen himself. He said, thank you for your love and passion in the Oakland Raiders. Our personnel staff is reviewing some of your suggestions. We feel that 11 draft picks and some free agents will help us improve our team. And I was like, what? I was like, huh? I was like, I'm 18 years old. I get my information from ESPN.com, and the general manager responded to me. But then I was like, ooh, light bulb. I was like, I have his email.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I would come home from college, and I would write 6, 7, 8 emails a day. We should sign this guy. We should do that. And to my shock, he would respond. It would be like one-liners like, no, yes, we can't do that. I remember I said we should trade for Eric Allen because we need a defense, right? I said the Saints want to trade him, or I don't know if I think it was on the Saints or the Eagles. I think the Saints. They only want a 4th-round draft pick or a 3rd-round pick. And then he's like, we got somebody today. But he couldn't tell me because it didn't come out on ESPN until 3 days later because it was slow back then. And then I read in the newspaper, Raiders trade for Eric Allen, right? So anyways, I'm not saying they were listening to me, but we were on the same page.
Yeah.
So literally after like 4 months of me harassing him, basically, right? He calls my house. Like, I'm sitting there, and we're coming in from Costco. I still remember the day. We're coming in from Costco. My sister answers the phone. She's like, Isaac, there's some old guy on the phone for you. He was my age, by the way, right? Showing, he was 42 at the time, right? She's like, Isaac, there's some old guy on the phone for you. I'm like, huh? I'm like, hello? He's like, Isaac? I'm like, yeah. He's like, Isaac Estrada? I'm like, yes. He's like, this is Bruce Allen. I'm like, hi. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm helping my parents bring in the groceries, He's like, you know what? I want to know what you're all about. He's like, I want to meet you. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, hell yeah. He's like, can you come down to training camp and interview with me? I was like, well, let me see you. Let me ask my parents, right? But he's like, yeah, come down to training camp. And it was in Napa, and I had never driven that far. I was only like 18 or whatever. Been driving for 2 years. He's like, can you come down to camp? I'll get you passes. We can sit down. And I'm like, sure. Boom. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, what? So anyways, I asked my best friend, and we drive up to Napa, and because they practice in the Napa Valley Marriott, like they rent out the whole hotel, and so my parents had always taught me, like, dress sharp, right?
Yeah.
It's like 100 degrees outside. I have a suit, right? And I'm walking up to training camp, and everyone's like in shorts, and this guy comes up to me. His name is Paul Kelly. Paul works for the Redskins right now. If you're listening to this, Paul, what's up, man? But so Paul comes up to me, and he's kind of one of those, like, straightforward guys. Like, he's like, excuse me. He's like, I don't mean to be rude, but what the hell are you doing here? I was like, I have a meeting with Bruce Allen. He's like, looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, well, Bruce Allen rarely ever does, if he ever does, meet anybody. Why would he want to meet you? And I was like, he called my house, And then he's like, hold on, let me go talk to Mr. Allen. So, the internet was brand new. I was like, oh, man. I was like, somebody played a joke on me. Like, I got catfish before I even knew what the hell catfish was, And so anyways, 5 minutes later, he comes out. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Here's your passes. Mr. Allen will be out in 5 minutes. You guys can sit there and watch practice. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought, right? So anyways, Bruce Allen comes out. He's my age at the time. Young, 42 years old. He's a general manager of the Raiders. And there's only 32 NFL teams. So there's only 32 jobs in the world. He has one of them, right? He's the son of a Hall of Fame football coach. He's like, you must be Isaac. He's like, loosen up that tie. He's like, you look kind of hot. He's like, we're not like that around here. Oh, he said, loosen up that tie. We're not like that around here. He's like, you know what? You look kind of hot. Let's go inside. And he gave us, like, T-shirts. And so he brought us into the bar in the hotel. And we sit down. And he's like, all right, Isaac. He starts chewing tobacco, by the way. He's like, what is this all about? Like, what do you want? And I don't know. I was just a crazy young kid. I was like, something clicked. I was like, I have to say something good. I'm like, I want your job. Like that. And he's like, he looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, who the hell is this guy, right? And he's like, well, my job just might be available sometime in the future. He's like, but for now, let's talk about the internship program, right? And he proceeded to tell me it was very difficult. There's thousands of people that apply. They only have 7, but he put in a good word for me, right? So he's like, I have to write this other guy who's Mark Ortega. Mark, if you're out there, hello, how's it going? Hope you're well. I think you're with the Redskins, or maybe I thought I saw you on the Raiders sideline. Anyways, what's up, Mark? So anyways, he said, you have to write Mark Ortega. He's the administrative assistant to head coach John Gruden. He's in charge of hiring the interns. He's like, I can't promise you anything. He's like, but I'll put in a good word for you. So I was like, all right. So I ended up writing Mark for probably like another 3 months, and I didn't really hear anything, right? And I would just write him, and then finally get the phone call. Isaac, yes. Isaac Estrada, yes. This is Mark Ortega, administrative assistant to head coach John Gruden. I was like, yes. He's like, you know what, Isaac? He's like, I apologize for not getting back to you because I literally shuffled through thousands of applications. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I didn't get it, He's like, and I only have 7 spots to fill. So I was like, all right, he's letting me down nicely, right? And he's like, but you know what? He's like, you've been the most persistent applicant I've ever had. And I've been here for 12 years.
Wow.
He's like, and I can hear the passion in your voice. He's like, so I'm going to give you a shot. He's like, show up to camp July. So July 17th, 1999.
17.
Yeah, 1999 was my first internship with the Oakland Raiders as an 18-year-old kid as a 19-year-old kid now, who wrote a letter, and that's how I got into the team.
Wow.
So my point to that long ass story was the whole time my parents were like, you're wasting your time. You're chasing an impossible dream. They're never going to hire you. Do your homework. And the minute I got the job, they're like, my son works for the Raiders. Mm-hmm. So my point to you people out there is, if you're having that struggle, like, you know, between what you really want to do and what your parents or society's telling you to do, trust me, like, go after what you want to do. You know what I mean? Because that moment, I proved to myself, they say that you can do anything in your life if you really put your mind to it and work hard. I literally proved it to myself at 18. I was like, holy crap. Like, I made this happen. Like, this is nuts. Like, I'm working for the NFL. I'm 18 years old. I'm an intern with the Raiders. I didn't know anybody. Everybody else in there had an uncle, a parent. They knew somebody that got them in, right? I was the only one that earned myself way in there, right? But here's the other thing to the story. So I was kept the longest out of all the interns in 1999. They wanted to bring me on board. I was ready to go into personnel at 18 years old. But I never got to meet Al Davis. Rest in peace, Al Davis. I never got to meet Al. I got to meet him once, but I didn't get to know him, right? And they were going to bring me into personnel, right? And that's like Al's, like, nobody goes into personnel unless I know you, right? Because he didn't trust anybody with his personnel department. So I remember I came in and Mark, I was like, he's like, I'm going to talk to Al tomorrow. He's like, come back tomorrow. We want to hire you full time, right? We like you. So I came in and it looked like Mark's dog died or something. Like, he was just like pacing back and forth. Like, he couldn't look at me. He's like, you know, I talked to Al. I said, you know, we like you. He's a good kid. We want to keep you. He's like, but he said, I don't know him. I don't trust him. I don't want him around. If you guys like him, bring him back next year. And I remember I was just like, man, I was like devastated. I was like trying to hold it in, you know. Yeah. I was like saying my goodbyes, and then I was leaving, and I was saying bye to everybody in personnel. And Michael Lombardi, he used to work for the Raiders. He was one of the personnel guys. He was really cool. Mike Lombardi, if you're out there, shout out to you. He's like, hey, Isaac, you ready to help us out today? I was like, nah, you know. Al said no. He's like, what? That's freaking bullshit. I hate the way they run things around here. And he like stormed out of and I was like, wow. Like, I felt kind of like, dang, like, I'm just this 18-year-old kid, right? And so anyways, I said my goodbyes. I came back next year. There wasn't an opportunity. The third year, I was supposed to go back. But my parents felt I was still chasing an impossible dream. And I love you, parents. I'm not holding this against you, but I'm just saying, parents, if you're out there, sometimes you need to just let your kids go and follow their dreams. So they said, you have to go to summer school. We're not letting you go to the internship. So I missed an internship. And I remember Mark told me, he goes, if you don't get hired the first year or the second year or the third year, just keep coming back. The worst thing you can do is disappear. Well, I was a kid. I had to listen to my parents. I went to summer school because I wasn't really doing well in school. Well, that year, John Gruden got traded to Tampa Bay, and all my connections within the organization left with him. And I remember they had already promised me a job that year, and I called, and Paul took over, and he said, you know, Mark didn't tell me about that. I heard already filled your spot. So my dream ended there, right? And, you know, they gave me a chance to interview for a full-time job in 2003, I think it was, a couple years later. It went to another guy. He's like with the Seattle Seahawks now. And I went on with my life, right? But my whole purpose to that story, number one, to inspire somebody. If you're out there and it seems impossible, like, just do it. I mean, if you believe it more than anybody else, and you work and you will it to happen, And by the way, I was doing affirmations back then. I had no idea what the hell they were, but I always had these older mentors in my life. He told me, write down, I am an intern with the Oakland Raiders, and put it everywhere. I had it in my car. I had it on my bathroom mirror. And now I'm an intern with the Oakland Raiders. I'm an intern with the Oakland Raiders. And so, yeah. So if you're out there and you want to do something, like, do it. Like, I hope, use my story as inspiration, because I did something that was, most people would think is impossible, right? And I willed it to happen. I affirmed it to happen. I worked hard for it to happen. And unfortunately, because of circumstance and because of, my parents believing that it was better for me to go to college, that door closed, right? But, I don't regret it. Everything happens for a reason, right? But my point to that is, a lot of times we struggle, because we're programmed to try to live someone else's dream. You know what I mean? Our parents' dream. Usually we end up living our parents' dream, right? So if you're out there and just ask yourself, am I really living my dream? Like, what is, if you're not living your dreams, you're probably living someone else's dreams. But if you really want to pursue your bliss and follow your passion, go do it. Because I proved it to myself when I was 18, and that's exactly what we're going to do here with this podcast. Because I know, I've done it. I know what it takes. Like, it takes work. It takes effort. I mean, everyone's going to be against you. But if you believe it in your heart, the whole world could not believe you. But if you believe in yourself, it's going to happen. So I just wanted to share that with you too, because I think that's kind of why a lot of us struggle, because we're trying to please everybody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? And life is not about pleasing everybody else. It's about you. Because in the end, who has to live your life?
Yourself.
You do, right? So if you're not living your truth, your purpose, your bliss, you're going to be miserable no matter what, because you're not staying true to yourself, And that's what this podcast is about, right? To be true to yourself, to follow your bliss,